So today I'll be talking about house hacking, what exactly is house hacking, and how it can change your future if you decide to do something as bold as this. Stay tuned. So first off, what exactly is house hacking? House hacking is the process in which you buy a multifamily property, you live in one of the units while renting out the remaining units. Now, for me personally, I came across this concept, I think in early 2023. Somebody I worked with gave me the idea, and initially I was against anything having to do with that. But as I began to think about it and ponder on the opportunity I had to get into my own property, but also owning an asset, turning my first place into an asset, it made all the sense in the world. Now, house hacking is such a great opportunity because though you have your own place, you're renting out the other units, which reduces your living expenses. So in a regular situation, you buy a house, you have a mortgage, let's say you have a mortgage of $1,500 a month. That $1,500 is coming out of your account every single month, which is the case when you're house hacking, but you don't really have a chance to make that money back by the end of the month. So you're looking at a situation where you can benefit off of the real estate and appreciation, but also every month you're having rent subsidize your mortgage to make it even easier, and making it to where you're living for less than what it looks like you're living for. So in that example, if I have a mortgage of $1,500 a month, say my first property was a duplex, and I rent out the other side for $1,000 a month. Now, instead of me living for $1,500 a month like I would in a regular situation, I'm really only living for $500 a month. So this made all the sense in the world to me, because I was somebody who was, working on the boat for a decent amount of time, saving up so much money, but I didn't really know what exactly to do with it. So when the idea came across my mind, or when that person came with that idea, it began to click how amazing this would be for me to invest in. So, in a regular situation, yeah, you have a place to live, but you really have no control, right? So when you're thinking about house hacking, it's not so much about the real estate, it's about the control you have when you have that asset. Now, with that being said, there are more things, more responsibility you have to worry about than in a regular situation. If you're renting out an apartment, or if you do own your own house, just outright, you are taking on a business. So you do have to have a business type of mindset, getting into it, understanding that the repairs of your tenants will be on you for the most part. Different things calls for different protocol, but in essence, you're over the whole thing, which sounds daunting at first, but being somebody who has done it, being somebody who has experienced it, is not as bad as you think. Because the tenants you get, you should always, if you're the property manager or if you have your own property manager, there should always be background checks, understanding a tenant's history at previous places for you to understand what type of person you'll be dealing with in your property, because everything comes back to you. So a lot of it may seem kind of scary at first, but realize that a lot of great things do seem scary. Just do your due diligence when it comes to understanding what you're really getting into. Do your background checks of the tenants and go from there. Now, this sounds amazing as a concept and extremely beneficial, and it really is beneficial, I can say myself. But we do have to talk about the sacrifices you'll have to make when getting into house hacking. So one of the sacrifices you have to make that you may not be that familiar with is being somebody who, one of the sacrifices you have to make that go into house hacking that you may already expect is you're going to be sharing a living space. Now, you're not going to be sharing a unit with, random people, but you will be sharing a property with others. So there may be times where you may have somebody above you. If you're in a lower unit and they're upstairs, you may hear them walking around, you may hear them screaming or yelling, or you may hear different types of commotion in your property. So understand, the least you can do when sharing your living space is control what you can control. Like with anything, control what you can control. You understand that really any regular person, any sane person does not want to have to deal with loud noises or any type of inconvenience whenever they're living in their house. So as long as you make sure that you're not being a nuisance to the people around you, at least you're covering your ground. Now, especially if you're the owner. If you're the owner of the property, you have to absolutely make sure that you're going to set the example to make sure you're trying to keep the whole area as peaceful as possible. You don't want to run anybody away, because that vacancy can hurt you. A vacancy can hurt you. Somebody decides that it's too loud, it's too chaotic in their house, they can leave, and you never know. I mean, if you've been smart enough with your money, you should have the reserves to cover that vacancy for however long that person stays out, or however long that vacancy is. But ultimately, you don't want to deal with that. So be considerate, be unselfish whenever you're the owner of a property. You set the example, and the tenants will follow most of the time. You also have to become comfortable with the discomfort of house hacking. In my situation, my first property was a triplex where there was 2 bottom units that were both 1-1s, and there was an upstairs unit in which, when I first got it, was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, but we renovated and made it a 4-bed, 1-bath. So with that, the 1-bed, 1-bath units were pretty small, but if you're somebody who can deal with a little bit of discomfort for a little bit of time, because, real quick side note, the rule is, when it comes to owner-occupied residences, before you move out, you have to stay in that unit, or you have to stay in that property for 1 year, 12 months, 1 year in all, before you move. So if you're able to think to yourself that you can be uncomfortable for a year, and it helped with me, being that I was on the boat for 4 weeks at a time and here back at home for 2, it was easier for that time to pass by, and before I knew it, it was almost time for me to move out. So if you're able to deal with that, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get into something like this and improve your future. And to be honest, back to the tenants, you may get somebody that's not so nice, right? Not so likable, not so easy to be around in regards to the living situation. I personally had a tenant who suffered from different mental problems, to say the least. But there was, near the end of his residency in my property, there was a lot of damage done to one of my units. And as the owner, you have to expect this, and you have to be ready to be able to deal with certain unfavorable situations and unfavorable people. Now, thank goodness that in that situation, he had some people who looked out for him and also looked out for us in the end. So a lot of the damage that was done was paid for, not by me, but by his guardians. So everything really worked out. And I'll do a separate video on that, to really detail the rundown of how insane it can get with certain tenants. Now, lastly, you want to think about delayed gratification, which I know we've all heard of, and I've done a short video on that before as well, and how we should really think about delayed gratification. But that's what you have to think about anything having to do with real estate or something like this, you do have to think about delayed gratification, because this process is not something that's pretty, but it's effective. So as long as you can deal with the discomfort, deal with sharing space, deal with certain types of people, crazy people, you'll be able to reap the benefits of the sacrifices you have made in the past for good. So getting into a little bit of the numbers aspect of my house hack. My first property was a triplex in which I purchased in a very good area for $375,000. Now through the FHA loan, I was able to put down only 3.5% of the purchase price, which is great because you can get into a house, you can purchase your first asset, your first place, you can own your own asset for as little as 3.5% down. So it was a great deal. It was a great move for myself at the time. Being that I put down so little, the mortgage in conjunction with the PMI that I have to pay, which is your premium mortgage insurance. The mortgage was pretty high. It was pretty steep. You know, my mortgage whenever I first purchased it was $3,500 a month. And what I was making in rent per month was around $2,700. So I was only living for really $800 a month instead of living for $3,500, which to me sounds like a great deal. So though I wasn't cash flowing off the rip, I wasn't really earning any money monthly, it was still a great deal because a huge chunk of my living expense is completely cut out because of the leverage I have with the other rents. So you become more flexible, being that you're saving so much more money than what the average person would do if they're owning their own house or even renting out an apartment. Because at the end of the day, you own what you live in. All the saved money that you have per month can go to improving the property or fixing it up whenever it needs. Because there's always something that is going to need to be fixed. So the fact that you're saving so much, you can have that as reserves for whenever a tenant may need a plumber to come out or an electrician to come out and check on some things. So you also become more flexible. So think about it like your living expenses decrease, but your options increase. You won't be as handicapped as another person may be that's on their own, because you actually have people helping you out with the mortgage every month, whether they know it or not. So when you get into something as big as this, and it is a big deal, you have to think about the intangible wins, the intangible things you gain from doing something so big and accomplishing something so big. Whenever I bought my first property, I was 22, and you realize that confidence is built through the process. Better decision making is built through the process. Attention to detail also is built throughout that process. And you know, I remember making the video, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. The video I made on ownership and having the owner's mindset is also something you take on, because you realize that you take on the responsibility of not only your unit, but the whole property. The whole property is your responsibility. And that's what I talked about in my video, where you take on the responsibility of your outcomes. So however much you put into this, for example, real quick, I decided to add 2 more bedrooms to my upstairs unit. So what was formerly a 2-1 was transformed into a 4-1, which then puts me in a position to get, I think at the time, it's like $600 more per month in rent for that area. So I know that though I have to take that sacrifice for renovation at the beginning, in the end, I will see the returns on my investment. So just understanding that the sacrifices on the front end will turn into rewards on the back end. And obviously I spoke on confidence. I had never thought I would be in something like this growing up. I would have never thought this was in the play for me. But The fact that I did what I had to do to understand what I needed to understand to get into it, and then actually going through the process of purchasing my first, you realize that there's really nothing to be scared of. Many things to be cautious of, but nothing to really be scared of. Just continue to research and put yourself in that position to win. Because if you're not even in a position to win, you're definitely not going to win. So embrace the sacrifice, embrace the owner's mindset, and lastly, embrace the learning curve. Not really knowing anything about the market and housing and owning, there was a lot for me to look up. There was a lot for me to get into, but at times it got kind of overwhelming. But you want to trust the process, and you never want to doubt how competent you are. Like everything that we have here as options in which we can get into in order to put ourselves in a better position for the future, you can figure out. There are many things that you at one time didn't know at all that you do like it's second nature right now. So let this be another example of a case like that where, yeah, it may be new to you, but that doesn't mean that you'll shy away from it, because we understand the benefits of what we're doing. So I guess with all this house hack talk, I guess one question to ask would be, what type of person should not house hack? The type of person I would say that cannot house hack, or that should not house hack, is the average person. And what I mean by the average person is somebody with an average mindset. So I talked about taking on the discomfort, taking on the inconvenience. Most people won't be able to get past those initial aches and pains of house hacking or anything this big. But that proves that the average person does not think big enough. Remember, house hacking is not something you do forever. It's a pathway to financial freedom for us. So if you're not able to see that light at the end of the tunnel, yeah, you probably shouldn't be somebody who's looking to invest in anything, really. Because all of it is going to take time in order for you to see the returns on your investment. And the irony is that when you put up with the inconvenience at first, you put up with what hurts at first, it actually accelerates your timeline for your goals. Instead of you going through what's most comfortable, if you just get over the things that you're uncomfortable with, you never know what may open up because of that first investment you made in yourself at the beginning, right? So for example, I talk about an accelerated timeline. I was able to buy my second property because of my house hack and the returns I made on that. I was able to look into my second property, buy my second property the very next year, around a year and a half later, instead of having to wait however much longer if I wasn't willing to put that extra money in for those repairs at the beginning or that renovation at the beginning. So it accelerated what my goals already were, but I got them done even faster. It literally led into my next investment property, which I cash flow pretty well off of now. It gives you a great amount of options to consider once you get your first house hack, get your first property, and from there, as long as you continue to be wise with your decisions. So house hacking buys time and it buys leverage, because you also have to think about the equity you're building in your property while renting out from, in my case, 2 units in my triplex. Every rent payment helps cover the mortgage, which means the loan balance can go down while the property value can go up. Over time, that gap, what you own versus what you owe, becomes equity. So you're buying the time and you're actually buying the leverage as well, that most people do not build as quickly as you would with house hacking, because you're getting so much help from other people through rent. So the entire thing, although there are so many benefits to house hacking, it's not about real estate. It's not about saving money. It's about owning your future. When we don't own our future, we all know somebody else will. If we don't have a distinct plan and strategy for how we want our future to look and how we want for it to play out, somebody else will have that plan for us. So when you house hack, you are taking on the responsibility of an owner of a business-minded person. But this only works if you're able to trade comfort for control. So whether you're whether you're somebody who's just graduated high school, somebody in college, somebody who's been working for however long, no matter the age, even if it's not house hacking, figure out a way to own your future or own something so that you can take full control of your destiny, where you want to go. House hacking worked for me, and it led me to my second property. Thank the Lord. And hopefully it leads me to even more. And this is why house hacking changed everything for me. But I just wanted to tell you to embrace discomfort, embrace the sacrifices that you have to make on the front end, because most likely you won't have to be making these same decisions forever. It's just a kick off to something great. So don't get so caught up in what may feel bad now, but focus, have that tunnel vision on what it can materialize into. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. I pray that everything that I said in this video serves you well. And I pray that you can take something and implement a little something right now so that you can begin the process of owning your future. So like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that, win at all costs, and I'm out.